Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. We may be apart, but we don't have to be alone. Social isolation has been highlighted by our current situation and is wearing on all of us. But it's not a new problem. Today we look at how social isolation affects us and ways we can deal with it. Joining me from his home in Burlington is Greg Marshallton, the Vermont State Director for AARP. Welcome and thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks a lot for having me, Fran.
Yeah. So although today we're going to talk about social isolation really for all of us, this has been a long-standing issue of concern for you. How does social isolation manifest in Vermont, and how much of a problem was it even before the pandemic?
Well, it's an excellent question because it was a significant problem before the pandemic, and the pandemic has only amplified and sort of exacerbated what was going on in Vermont with social isolation pre-pandemic. We're a very rural state, and states that have rural populations with small towns and small hamlets and people living far away from sort of town centers or urban centers, you see a lot of social isolation in states like that. And Vermont, being the second oldest state in the nation, obviously is no exception. So it's a significant problem. Some 58,000 Vermonters over the age of 55 live alone. And many of them are over 65, over 70. The fastest growing portion of our population, frankly, are people 82 and over. So social isolation is a significant problem and becoming an even a bigger one as we move forward.
And what are the long-term implications of social isolation? What happens when somebody is alone that much?
Well, some of your viewers may be surprised, but it's it can be worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, for example. It can have tremendous health impacts on individuals. Stress, as we all know, is a major cause of exacerbating physical conditions, and social isolation causes a tremendous amount of stress in people, and it manifests itself in a variety of illnesses. So the direct correlation between living alone and being isolated and your personal health and your physical health are directly related.
Wow. And what are your major concerns now with the lengthy stay-at-home orders?
Yeah, well, we're really, really concerned about this, and we've talked to elected officials and have had conversations with the administration. This is something that we have to pay particularly close attention to right now. We're not sure how long our stay-at-home orders will be in place. Obviously, the older you are, the less, the more likely you are to have not a good health impact if you are to contract COVID-19. So we really have to start thinking through some new strategies about how we reach out to people who are socially isolated, and that's complicated for a number of reasons, which I'd be happy to talk about.
Well, what are ways we can reach out to people who are isolated? What do we need to think about?
Well, let me just start with one of the problems we need to overcome is that we're a state that still doesn't have good broadband connectivity to many of our rural communities and frankly most of our state. So if you live in Burlington or Montpelier or Rutland or Brattleboro, you've got good internet and you can reach out. But folks that live in more rural environments have been struggling and frankly complaining about this for years. So you can't use the technology, some of the terrific technology that's been developed over the last several decades to do, frankly, what you and I are doing right now, which is have a conversation on our home personal computers. So we have to really take a step back and think about what this means. And again, investments in broadband will be really important because things like conversations like we're having, telehealth, telemedicine is extremely important when people are isolated at home. We can do that here in Vermont, but if you don't have a high-speed connection, you're not going to be able to talk to folks or see a doctor or any such thing, frankly.
So if they don't have that, what are some ways we can reach out? I mean, it's interesting that the World Health Organization said it's really about physical distancing, not social distancing. I think that's such an important distinction, but somehow we've gotten into the social distancing thing, but it's really physical distancing. We can visit
That's
neighbors if we need to, or how do we reach out in that physical way without endangering anyone?
right. Well, let me provide an example. I have elderly parents who live here in Burlington. Both are should be people that need to be protected. They have compromised immune systems. Last weekend, they drove over to my house. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We set up my chairs in the backyard with
Hmm.
appropriate physical distancing and wore masks, and we're able to spend a nice hour and a half together. So that distinction that the World Health Organization is talking about is very important. It's not that we can't see people who are socially isolated. It's just that if we do, we have to do it in the correct context. Obviously, it's really great that we're moving into the spring and the summer months
Mm.
where the weather will be warmer and the light will be longer. But if you look at those WHO and CDC guidelines, you're talking 6 to 8 feet of space between someone wearing a mask. Those two things will protect people from, largely protect people from contracting the virus. So I think people, as you noted, Fran, are confusing social distancing and physical distancing and thinking they can't go see people who may be more frail because they're worried that they would contract the disease or contract the virus and have a bad outcome. So again, it's about looking at those physical distancing options that are being talked about by all the medical experts
Sure.
and following them closely.
And wearing
This
masks.
pandemic is yeah, wearing
It's
masks
okay.
and at 6 to 10 feet, those two things, and doing it outside,
Right.
the combination of those three things can make a huge difference and make it a perfectly safe environment to do this in.
So I've been really impressed at mutual aid groups that are popping up all over Vermont. Will you review quickly what those groups are and how people can hook into that network that could be in their own towns, even though they're
Sure.
in all over Vermont?
That's right. Well, we started something at AARP called AARP Community Connections, and I think we'll be showing a web address for that later
Mm-hmm.
in this interview.
Right.
Um, but that allows folks to essentially geo-target. You put in Middlesex, you put in Montpelier, you put in St. Albans, and you can find groups that are self-organizing. You're seeing that stuff on regular social media too, on Facebook particularly. Folks in specific communities are putting out messages and banding together, figuring out ways to get food to socially isolated people. We've got a big food insecurity problem going on right now. Figuring out how to reach out to folks. Um, there are senior centers all across the state who are acting in a virtual mode right now, but
Mm.
reaching out to your local senior center or your local meal site. They're bringing people together to help folks reach out to folks, and it's a lot of people just doing what they feel is right, and it's extremely gratifying to see this developing because we're going to need this not just right now, but really until we find some kind of an immunization for COVID-19.
Right. And you also have talked about how we talked a little bit about this. Virtual gatherings, they're just not the same as physical ones, but they offer connections with new and old friends if you have it. And some people have found it's even more revealing or authentic in the Zoom setting. People feel more free to talk about things. Any other observations about virtual gatherings, Greg?
Well, I think you've named a few things, and I think that one of the things that's been interesting to us is that people have um, going into them being sort of very standoffish about them. Sort of, this is not going to be a personal experience, it seems. And then they find themselves connecting with someone or a group of someone's and engaging in real, authentic conversation. And if you're someone that's living alone or socially isolated, that kind of 45 minutes or an hour or even 10 to 15 minutes has you talking about the things that are really on your mind. So we're seeing that people are revealing how they feel. And when they do that, that relieves stress. And then they realize that there are people out there that are checking in on them. And it makes a huge difference in someone's, again, their physical health, but also their emotional health.
Mm. And in a recent essay, you also talked about even going old school, dropping off a note by mail, that's another way of connecting, not hard, but very intimate.
Yeah, Fran, when was the last time you received a 2 or a 3 page postage paid letter from somebody? I don't know, maybe it was recently. For me, it's been quite a long time. Pick up the pen, grab a piece of paper, put a stamp on it, and have that arrive at someone's house who is isolated. Reading a letter can be one of the most personally fulfilling things an individual do. We have so gotten away from that with technology that if we just take a step back and look at an old school landline phone call, or a letter to somebody, that kind of thing can make a huge difference in someone who is experiencing real social isolation.
And how do we encourage someone who is isolated and feeling isolated? How do we encourage them to make that first step to reach out? Because sometimes that's what has to happen.
That's right. And these folks need to make sure that they understand that they have to be a part of the effort and not just expect stuff always be incoming, that they need to engage in this as well. And that's picking up the phone and calling somebody and saying, look, I'm just having a tough day. Or calling someone and saying, look, I'm living alone, I'm isolated, and I'm wondering whether we could schedule a Skype call or a
Mm.
phone call or something each week that I could count on and put in my calendar. So the folks that are isolated have to engage in this process as well. People have a lot going on right now, but when they're reminded, they're like, oh, my aunt, my grandparent, um, all I need to do is schedule a 15 or 20-minute call with them every week or every other day, whatever
Yeah.
feels right. Those sorts of things can make a big difference.
I'm wondering also, as it gets warmer and we're beginning to get out a little bit, and we have to really pay attention, but even to wave at the postman or probably is very helpful, and we can begin to do that now.
That's right. I mean, again, I think that we're very fortunate that the pandemic did not strike us in October, leading into long, cold, and dark winter months. We've got a lot of sunlight and a lot of daylight ahead of us. So, coming and saying hi to the postman who comes to your house once a day, um, is sitting in your yard with a mask, and as people walk by on the sidewalk, waving to them, saying
Mm.
hello to them, just seeing other folks doing things that we took for granted, but 8, 9 weeks ago, can really lift someone's spirits.
Greg, before we go, I want to encourage listeners to go to the AARP Community Connections page, where they can find these mutual aid groups we were talking about earlier, near them to connect or volunteer. That's at aarpcommunityconnections.org. Of course, AARP website also has lots of resources, or you can even call your town to get connected with some of these. Greg Marshallton, State Director of AARP, again, thank you for joining us today. And
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, friend.
Okay, great. And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well. I think is much better. That caught me a little at the end, but that was fabulous, perfect. I think we got a
Oh,
lot of
great.
information out. I hope you felt good about it.
Oh, I did feel really good about it. I think we got a lot out in
Yeah.
10 or 12 minutes or whatever that was.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll let you know when this airs. It might